episode of the Project Egg Show. I'm your host, Ben Gothard, and today we have the honor of speaking with Edward Crawford. How you doing today?
Doing wonderful, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to chat with you because, doing a little bit of research on you and your background, you have such an amazing history, doing so many different things that are so exciting. And it seems like in a very short amount of time also. So, I'm really interested to kind of go through that chronology and understand and really understand it, right? So I guess my question for you is, what is your story?
Yeah. So I guess you could start with service is really a big part of my story. And I really learned that from my grandfather. So my grandfather escaped in 1938, before Crystal Night. He escaped Austria as an Austrian Jew. He applied to the U.S. military twice as an Austrian to fight the Nazis. They rejected him. The U.S. did because he was Austrian, but he made it to this country, became a doctor and a healer, ultimately joining the army and serving many of the people that had fought to save his people in Austria. And so he thought this country was amazing. Everything was taken from him, his family, his way of life, in his country. And he became an American, and he instilled in me that desire to serve and make the world a better place. And that love of country as well. And so that's a lot of my story, why I ended up serving in the Peace Corps, post-Katrina New Orleans, and then ultimately the Navy as well. And kind of what I'm doing now in business, I consider service as well. So it's been a theme throughout my life, but really it was inspired from a guy that's been through a lot tougher things in life, my grandfather.
So let's actually talk about how he instilled that in you. Like, was it your conversations? Did he lead by example? Was it a combination of a few different things? How did he actually do that? Yeah.
Well, there's a saying that I always love: preach often, and when necessary, use words. And so he definitely led by example. But I'll kind of give you one really big example. So, many of the people that escaped from Nazi Europe, right? There's a lot of bitterness and anger. They went through they lost everything, right? And what Granddaddy did was very different. In fact, he ultimately forgave Hitler and got rid of the anger in his heart and started to serve and love others. He could have been angry, he could have been bitter, and he wasn't. And so that example to me, along with the fact that he came here and didn't need to join the army, but did it anyway. That was really the example that he set for me. And he would say, "I love this country," in his Austrian accent, which sometimes I didn't understand very well. He would tell me how amazing it was here, and he was just a man of character, but that could have been bitter and angry, and that was full of love and generosity and service. And so his example spoke to me.
So it seems like it was through actions of extreme kindness and grace and forgiveness that really he showed you and didn't as much have to say it.
Right. He didn't need to use words because it was obvious what he had done. Track record speaks pretty loud.
That's amazing. It seems like he was a big influence in your life.
He was. And as a matter of fact, he escaped with some musical instruments because he knew the Nazis wouldn't take those from him. And today, my brother, who just graduated from Juilliard, plays his 200-year-old cello and has soloed with the Shreveport Symphony, with the Philadelphia Symphony. He's played it in the Louvre, in Moscow. And so that cello, my grandfather has passed away. Robert Popper was his name, but that cello has kept his journey going. And if he knew back in Austria that that's what would have happened, I think he wouldn't have believed it. So it's really been a neat story.
That's amazing. So take us through some of your younger years. Who were you as a kid, and what was your childhood like?
Yeah, I was very adventurous. I would say I took after my granddad in that regard as well. Growing up in Louisiana, I spent a lot of time in the swamps. And so I grew up eating a lot of crawfish. I would go to Natchitoches Parish, Louisiana a lot and catch little alligators, and that became a hobby, just being out in the swamp and in nature. ended up as the older of four boys. I had to kind of become a leader quickly or get out of the way. Some of my brothers ended up being bigger than me. So that was, that was a part of it, being the older of four boys, always just jumping into challenges, playing sports, lacrosse, getting involved in student government, those types of things. And then ultimately it was, I knew in high school I wanted to serve in the military, maybe the Peace Corps, and in college, it was just, it wasn't if, it was when, and which path to choose.
So when you were going through that decision-making process, or maybe it wasn't a process, maybe it was just this innate feeling, what was actually going through your head? I mean, were you thinking, I want to be just like my grandfather and I want to go serve in that specific way? Or was there, was it kind of like a back and forth? Like, how did you actually make that decision, and where did that come from?
Yeah. So I looked at going straight into the military and a lot of different things. And for a reason that's fairly specific, I went into the Peace Corps. And how I thought about this was, I'm driven through faith, and faith has gotten me through a lot of things. And so I felt that to be a true humble servant, to serve with some of the poorest of the poor, was the best way to start out in life after college, right? And so I thought that getting on the ground and living with people who were struggling and in poverty and helping them was the best way I could show my heart and show that I cared, and try to lead through service. And so that was where I wanted to start. In fact, not the military, but kind of showing service through love and actions that way is why I chose the Peace Corps ultimately.
It seems like we're already seeing somewhat of a golden thread here, of leadership and service being things that are valued or have been valued throughout the narrative thus far. Yeah.
Well, that's, I learned the Peace Corps was my first experience with servant leadership, really. And I lost 40 pounds to amoebic dysentery, dengue fever. I got very sick, right? I had tried to convince the farmers to start this coffee cooperative that we ultimately started, cooperative. They didn't show up to my meetings. They liked me, but they just didn't believe, didn't necessarily trust me all the way. So I started working with them. I started really actually serving, and I'd go up the mountains every day, and eventually I couldn't keep up, and I got sicker and sicker. And it wasn't until I got to the point, I got so sick, I between us, I thought about giving up on life. It was tough. Like, I got very sick, living in a little $12 a month shack. And this community that I'd come to rescue and help now had to rescue me. And so it wasn't until they saw that I was willing to kind of give everything in my personal health that they, came to my rescue, trusted me, and ultimately followed me and let me lead. And so today there are 300 people in the coffee cooperative. Many years later, they've planted 2 million coffee trees in the mountains. They've built community centers, roads, and they have a saying in Espanol and Spanish called "En la unión tenemos la fuerza." And the objective was, it means in union, we have power. And so organizing them in this cooperative structure in this coffee business has helped them to achieve a lot of goals. But I would have never got them there if I hadn't shown them, hey, I was willing to really get on my knees and serve you guys to the extent that I actually risk my own life and health. And that's what ultimately kind of brought us together. So it was a real life example that I sometimes have to learn things the hard way. And that was one of those examples. Maybe I should have just done that in the first place, but it was an example of learning servant leadership the hard way. But it worked, and I've been back every year since then, except for the year I was in Afghanistan. I took my 8-year-old daughter back last year, and the Dominican and Haitian farmers I work with are some of my biggest heroes in life. So it's a really neat experience, and still a community I'm very much a part of.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So when you were there, and it seems like you were really, really in a spot of danger to the point of losing your life, which, to talk about it now, obviously I don't know because you were the one that experienced that, but there's almost no way that we could fully understand like the struggle and the pain that you were actually going through at that time. So when you were going through that, and then once you made it through that and you started to see this project building and this community building and the fruits of your labor, how did that change you? How did that shape your identity and impact you as a person?
Yeah, it made me realize that actions speak louder than words. And the transition really being, I think in the Peace Corps, you go and I know some Marines joined the Peace Corps and they lasted a few months and then quit and said the people wouldn't do what I told them to do. And that's not the way it works. And so, I think how it changed me is it showed me that, it doesn't matter what degrees you have. It doesn't matter where you've worked. It doesn't matter, how smart you are. People only care what you know when they know that you care, right? To use Roosevelt's saying. And it made me realize that if you're going to work with people in any environment, and I've now worked with some of the wealthiest people in the world through Goldman Sachs and MIT and some of the most impoverished people in the world in Haiti, Dominican, and Afghanistan, that you've got to really serve at their level and you've got to be humble. And so it taught me humility. I had a high degree of confidence in myself and a lot of things that I could do. And when that came shattering down and I realized how unimportant, frail, and weak I truly was, and how kind of small I was in this grand scheme of things, it allowed me to be a better servant and I think a better leader. So it really changed the way I thought. It's not, hey, I'm going to get more important and then people will listen to me. It's no, I'm going to invest in them and care about them and then they'll listen to me. So it just paradigm shift for me, which is why I truly believe in servant leadership. And I think that some of the best leaders in the world really demonstrate that. And it's much needed in our society today, in our country, frankly.
That's a very humbling realization of, wow, maybe I'm not as important as I think I am. In one capacity, obviously we all have value as human beings, but it makes me think, in order to set big goals and accomplish big goals and do incredible things as you've done throughout your life, which I'm very excited to continue talking about, it would seem like we would have to have some sort of confidence or maybe even, possibly a touch of arrogance to think, wow, I could do this, or this is the level that I want to go to. But then there's that other side, which we just spoke of really getting humbled by like the reality of the world. Is that something? Is there a tension there? Can they both coincide? And like, how do you actually navigate that to empower yourself to be able to accomplish the big things, but not get too big for your britches?
Yeah. I think there's a belief, how much do you believe in yourself? And one of the things I get accused of sometimes is not taking myself too seriously. And having been in life and death, dramatic situations, I think you in business, you get paid for the risk you take, right? And so there's a degree of risk that I'm maybe more comfortable with because I might not be dead the next day if I take it. And so I have a bit of confidence around that, knowing that a lot of the financial and business risks I'm taking don't mean that my family and I are going to get wiped out by the Taliban or something terrible tomorrow. And so I think I have a little bit more confidence knowing that these things that happen in business and life in that context aren't going to be life-threatening. And so it gives me a little more peace and confidence, I would say, in some situations. I don't get as anxious because you're not, your life's not at risk and that sort of thing.
So it seems like recognizing the situation you're actually in, not getting too wrapped up in, oh, this could be bad for my wallet if it doesn't work out, but I'm still going to survive at the end of the day. Like I'm going to make it till tomorrow.
Right. as an intelligence officer, you learn to think about context, right? And so I try to put things, individual problem sets, into a greater context, which is life, faith, family. And so contextualizing things has helped me to not get so scared about taking risks in different scenarios.
That's interesting. So can you maybe explain that a little bit more, like contextualizing it? I mean, like how can we practically implement that into our lives today?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example. If you're working in a business, and I've been in this spot before too, and you're going to have a big sale for the year, or a big deal is going to come through, right? And that doesn't come through, and it affects you financially, and you have to adjust, right? Or you have to go out and you have to find that next sale or that next deal or that next business to get. Instead of getting down on yourself, you say, okay, what's my context here? Where am I going to be in 40 years, right? Who's going to be at my funeral? What's going to happen when my grandkids are on my knee? And you think, hey, 40 years from now, this just isn't going to matter. It's just going to be a blip on the road. And so looking at things longer term and contextualizing them, then you come back and you say, okay, I'm either going to not worry about this and we'll get it done next year, or, hey, I'm going to fill this hole. I'm going to get this sale. I'm going to get this new client. I'm going to get this deal done. And you just go and execute in a more of a positive, forward-leaning way, as opposed to a scared, oh my gosh, sky is falling way.
So it's almost like detaching yourself from the immediacy of the situation and saying, okay, well, in the greater scheme of things, this really isn't the end of the world. Like, it's not that big of a deal. I'm going to be okay. And then once you realize that, then almost zooming back in with that same mindset and being like, okay, rationally, like, what are my options here? How can I approach this? Do I just kind of say, all right, maybe it can wait till next year, or approach it from, all right, this is what I need to do to get it done. Let's just execute and be on it.
Right. It helps you from an emotional or an EQ standpoint. It helps you to kind of control your emotions and just think logically through the problem set, as opposed to getting so emotionally involved that it affects you in a negative way. It doesn't always work that way. I still get emotional, but it's something that I think has helped me over my career in life by having different contexts to understand that this one can be handled in a more manageable way in many cases.
Well, to me, that's a very, very powerful framework, because it almost gives you a tool to be able to check yourself and your decision-making process. Because, like, if you're in the middle of it and you're about to pull the trigger on something, but it may not feel right, you could say, all right, wait a second. Let me zoom out, assess, zoom back in, dive back into it. That's a very powerful tool. I actually think that can help a lot of people who just may have not articulated that before, never been exposed to that sort of thinking. So I want to shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
When you were in the Peace Corps, how did you then transition out of that role?
Yeah. So I was in the Peace Corps 2005. So it actually set up, you may have noticed through my background that I kind of follow my heart through a lot of things. And in 2005, Katrina happened in New Orleans, right? So I applied to graduate school in New Orleans, went to Tulane, and was part of the rebuilding of New Orleans. I love my home state. I'm fourth generation Louisiana guy. Love the Saints and the whole thing. And so was able to go. Well, yeah, say they're gonna beat them Saints. I love it. So I was able to go back, be part of, helped rebuild a school, Samuel Green Charter School, as a Jones Scholar at Tulane, and be part of this amazing community and this kind of revival of what today is New Orleans, which is a different New Orleans, a different Tulane. Tulane is service oriented, involved in the community. It wasn't historically. There's more Peace Corps volunteers returning to Tulane than any other school in the nation. And they have a compulsory service component. I'm on the board of the business school there now. And so it was from one passion project to the next, really, and just being involved in the city, in the school, and what it meant to serve others. And then I got to work under John Elstrott, who is a mentor of mine. He was one of the founding guys at Whole Foods and chairman of Whole Foods, Celestial Seasonings, Soy Milk, and others. And he had this double bottom line business model where you could help people, right? And you can make a profit. And you've got to do both, because the profit keeps the business going, but helping people keeps them alive and excited about what they're doing, whether it's their employees, whether it's the owners, whether it's farmers that you're buying oranges from to ultimately sell orange juice in your store. And so I was able to go from the Peace Corps, take these kind of business lessons to help people through the cooperative that helped the farmers make more money for their families, and then learn this in business and say, okay, how through the business world can you serve others, make the world a better place? How do you do both? And I am convinced 100% that doing both makes the business better, makes it more sustainable, it makes more profit, and that it's a win-win. And so was able to go from that one passion project into the next, both with some business and some kind of service and making an impact.
So how did you actually go about aligning yourself with the gentleman from Whole Foods? How did that come about? What was that conversation like?
Yeah, he was a professor and is still involved in New Orleans. He is, I would say, an incredible servant leader. I can't tell you how many people like me he's mentored over the years and taken his very important and expensive time to do that. He was a professor there when I was there and ran the Entrepreneurship Institute. So I actually had a business plan at the that was a social entrepreneurship business plan. And I think the prize was like 10 grand or something like that. But he coached me on it. We ultimately entered the competition and won the competition. And he was my mentor for that. So that's how we kind of got involved. And then we've stayed in touch through the years as well. Looked at different things. He's given me advice over the years and been very helpful to me, I would say, in my career, but also just really as a person, because I think he's a really amazing person.
That's incredible. So you had this amazing professor at school that was also this knockout entrepreneur, and then it seems like y'all have had this amazing relationship ever since then. That's incredible.
Yeah, and he probably has no idea how much of an impact he's had, because he talks to so many guys like me. There's more like me than there are like him. But he is, I would say, relative to how important and wealthy and amazing he's been as a business leader, he's very humble and kind, and that's something you don't often see. And so I've always looked up to him in that regard.
From that moment when you were in school, and providing service in New Orleans, also it seems like you were learning about business and entrepreneurship at the same time. What was your path from there?
Yeah, so I took a dual path. What I ended up doing is I wanted to really learn the world of business from an institution at the highest levels. And Goldman Sachs seemed to be one of those institutions. So I actually joined the Navy Reserves while I was at Tulane Graduate School as an intelligence officer, went through my training and started in the Navy Reserves, and joined Goldman Sachs around the same time, right? So I was one foot in this institution at the higher level of finance and business, drinking through the fire hose, learning quickly. Peace Corps to Goldman Sachs isn't a transition a lot of people make. So I was a little behind the eight ball and had to catch up, put the work in. And then at the same time was doing the Navy Reserve work. So was able to really, once again, do service and business.
And so what was your inspiration for really wanting to get into business? Like, why was that a goal of yours?
Well, I saw business leaders be able to make an impact, right? Whether they did it through their communities, whether they did it through investment, or whether they did it through public service, right? I think Goldman Sachs, for example, is a place where a lot of people have gone on to public service, whether it's the Treasury or politics or just public service roles. They also had a very strong military presence, Peace Corps Volunteer America, AmeriCorps volunteers, in fact, have many friends from those organizations in Goldman Sachs. And so the business world seemed to me to be a place that I could earn a living for my family, but also create value in the world and serve through business. So I've always had, ever since I was little, had a bit of that kind of business bug.
And was it a particular type of company that you wanted to start, or you just knew you wanted to be in business?
Yeah, I just knew I wanted to be in a place where I could lead others, and try to make a positive impact. And so as I've gone through different types of businesses, I've seen different types of opportunities to do that. It's melded my thinking as I've moved around through my career.
What have been some of the evolutions of your thinking?
Yeah, so I would say, I had a very life-altering experience deployed in Afghanistan. I can tell you a bit about that, but coming back to Goldman after that, I really started to be very involved with our military recruiting and supporting military who are transitioning and trying to help them get jobs, whether it's Goldman Sachs or somewhere else, right? And so that evolved my thinking. I went from there to a business that was very driven by service and impact as well. It was a business that tried to create more community in the world. So ultimately, we would acquire multifamily apartments. We would renovate them and then try to build out a community by talking to the people in the community about what they wanted, and whether it was a dog park or whether it was a swimming pool, but try to build something. This is their home, and try to treat them with dignity and respect in their home, and create a community for someone who was in one of these houses, and say, hey, we're not a landlord, we're not a slumlord. These are these people's houses, and we want them to feel comfortable and good, and we want to create a community to where they can raise their families and thrive. And so I moved from Goldman into that business, and that was kind of a step into a business that what I would say is more kind of like John Elstrott, the double bottom line type of model. It evolved into there. And then ultimately what I'm doing today at Coltala, once again, we're trying to find leaders with a servant heart orientation. And we are working on 2 opportunities right now where that is the case, and everything from our investors to our partners are very aligned with that type of model.
So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about that turning point in Afghanistan that you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we I guess there were a couple. I had a friend of mine who was killed in an insider attack, and we lost a couple others along the way. We ended up ultimately losing our commander, and had to kind of bind together to make things work. And it was one of those moments, once again, it's kind of like my grandfather. There was an opportunity to be angry and bitter and frustrated and kind of hopeless. But the leadership, and I have to speak to the team, their leadership was incredible. We kind of committed to one another to serve each other, and really made it through. And we lost a great man in our commander, and then some of the others that we lost. But we didn't lose the mission. We stuck through it. And so coming back after that experience, I really said, hey, how can I make my life more about service? How can I continue to have a career, but to where I do it through others as well? And that was, I think, some of the evolution that I've gone through. But it was very impactful in my life, and had some incredible leaders. My first commander was a guy named Mike Hayes, who ended up being a mentor of mine, and just really helping me through situations in life. So very eye-opening, very growing, and I'm still growing to this day, even though I'll be 40 in a year or so. But really a great area of personal growth, and learning from a lot of men who are not here today that are much better men than I am, from them and their heroism.
So it seems like mentorship has also been a pretty big piece of your life.
Yeah.
Are there any other mentors of yours that we haven't talked about that have been very influential?
Yeah, I think commander. I've had 2 commanders in the military on the intel side. They're both captains now. Captain Brad Boyer and Captain Mike Friedberg have been incredible mentors to me throughout my career in the military. Both of them, by the way, have been in business. One of them was a Harvard Business School guy and worked on Wall Street, and the other has been at one of the top consulting firms and done very successfully in business as well. And so they've helped mentor me through this life of trying to do both. Been very involved. Today I have a mentor named Chuck Jarvie, who ran Dr. Pepper here in Dallas and has run many other companies. And he's 82 years old, but he's really taken the time to take me under his wing and show me how the world works, as he would say. And so yeah, when you're from Louisiana and you start behind the eight ball, you find people that are smarter and have been successful that have gone before you, and try to learn from them. So I've spent a lot of my life with mentors who are, trying to make me better and trying to learn from them.
So you mentioned how you moved from Goldman into the double bottom line based business, and obviously now, you're doing something a little bit different. Can you talk about that chronology and how you actually got to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. So I moved to Dallas with this business. It's called InvestRes, which was the residential community-based business, right? And then I was co-officing with a good friend of mine who his name is Ralph Manning. And I was going to office down the hall with another group, and I called him and said I might be in his building. He said, well, come on down. We'll give you a better price. You office down here. And so we have been, we were introduced by my sister-in-law, and we have been, this was, 12 years ago, something like that, and have just kept in touch, always wanted to do something together. And we had this value alignment, right? He had been in the private equity business for 20 plus years, had been very successful, and thought there was another way to do it. He's also a man of character who really wants to do right in the world and help people. And we came together and really built a model together. He took the lead on it. I came in, and then we just started working on it and ultimately started it, and have had an incredible time together and kind of building the business. So
that's amazing. So
we have kind of three pillars. So we have purpose driven. So we look for companies to invest in that are really, going places and impacting lives. And so we want to track, how much money you make in the business, but also how many lives you impact, right? And that starts with the leadership and management teams of the businesses that we invest with. So, we have two that we're working closely with today, and they have that servant leadership type of value. So we lead with purpose, so purpose-driven businesses, right? And we have longer-term capital, so we can stick with businesses for the long term to make an impact through various cycles. And then the third thing is we have what's called the Coltala Enterprise System, which is a lean enterprise system. So it's about something called Kaizen, which is continuous improvement, right? So we're constantly helping each other get better. And it comes with this humble approach where you focus on the problem set. If somebody makes a mistake, you don't focus on the person, but on the problem set. And you kind of have this open environment of that. So we've used it on ourselves and with businesses, and that continuous learning way of life has been something that we've really enjoyed doing together.
That's amazing. So when you're going about running your business and it seems like everybody has their own strength, their own superpower. What would you say you're the best at as far as like your strengths, your weaknesses, where you really shine, your area of genius?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say that I have any area of genius. I would say where I do pretty well is understanding people and context around people. So understanding what motivates people and trying to discern. Part of my job is kind of like an intelligence officer. So we'll talk to 200 CEOs or business owners a year and try to determine which one or two we're going to work with. And so part of my superpower, if you will, is trying to understand which is the right fit, right? Who really cares about taking their business to the next level. And then, some of the ones that maybe not be a fit are those who, they're up here and their employees are down here. There's a lot of power distance between the two. And it's a my way or the highway kind of tough guy approach. And we don't see that as a way to ultimately build a great business where everybody's rowing in one direction and feels important. But then you'll run into that leader who's a servant leader, right? And who has the courage to go out and do what's necessary, whether it's sweeping the floors or rolling the sleeves up on the shop floor to help their employees. we find those kind of inspirational servant leaders that are transformational. And so my superpower is just finding those and trying to support them. So I like to say my purpose here on earth is to inspire and guide servant leaders to create radical impact in this world and beyond. And so that's what I try to do is find them, identify them, and then just support them. Right.
When did you get crystal clear on that particular skill set of yours?
Yeah, I think it might have been in between Goldman and Avesta. I think whether we were recruiting people that we thought would be good in the firm at Goldman Sachs or Avesta, I realized that recruiting people and trying to inspire them, bring them on, and develop them was something I really enjoyed doing. I didn't really know if I was good at it or not, but because I've had so many incredibly powerful mentors in my life, I've kind of promised them, I said, hey, if I'm ever kind of successful, if I'm ever half as successful as you guys, I'm going to turn around and try to help somebody else kind of make it up that chain too. And so it was really a passion for finding somebody I thought had a lot of talent, cared a lot, and was a good person and wanted to go to this next level, and investing in them. I just started doing it over and over again. And then I think I did get good at it along the way, but it's really just something I enjoy so much, I can't help but do it.
So at this stage in the game, clearly, I mean, you've done so many amazing things. What's next?
It's a good question. I think where I am, it's helping others come up, right? I've had so many people help me. And so I'm at the point where it's not really all about me anymore. It's about who I can help. I run a political action committee that helps a lot of military run for office. So we help guys like Dan Crenshaw, the guy with the eye patch, in his early days, and others. And so really feel passionate about finding veterans who are coming home and want to serve again, and taking it to the next level and helping them. I've done some talks with a guy named Joe Kennedy, who was in the Peace Corps with me. And we've tried to inspire more people to go to the Peace Corps, right? And sign on the line and, take 2 years off to really serve and help others. And so I think the next step for me is how many people can I was inspired by my grandfather to have the courage to serve, and how many people can I inspire to go serve as well, and not just for others, but for them, because I truly think it'll make them better and make their life experience richer as well.
At this stage in the game, what questions do you still have about yourself?
Yeah, I think some of the questions I have about myself are, have I been the leader I've always wanted to be, right? You're telling me that I've done some things that have been great, and it may look like that, but about 7 weeks ago, I had a experience where I sat in a doctor's office, and I looked up at a screen, and he said, "Son, you shouldn't be here. You're very lucky to be alive." And he pointed to blood clots in my lungs, and I realized that I could have been kind of a goner, and I dodged a bullet, right? And so it made sitting and talking to my little 4-year-old girl later that day, and her asking, "Are you okay, Daddy?" This and that. Just simple things. I question, am I on my phone too much? Am I working too much? Like, how do I come across? How do I show up as a leader? Am I showing up in a kind of workaholic fashion too much, or am I showing up in a kind, loving servant way? So I think I'm always questioning about myself whether I'm doing enough. And I think I'll always question whether I've done enough. My mother started a Suzuki program called the Centenary Suzuki Program in Shreveport, Louisiana. And as a true community leader, she's put, I think, 3,000 people through this program, and she just is always helping them. My father's a community leader who's just always in the community, rolling his sleeves up, doing stuff for others. So I have both a father and a mother that have done so much that I'll always wonder if I can ever do as much as they have. So that's where I question myself. That's my insecurity, I would say, is will I ever be able to accomplish as much in helping others as they have?
What's your dark side?
Huh? Oh, my dark side?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, periodically I can have a pretty dark side. I can go, I can be sometimes aggressive or tough sometimes. And I think through some of the experiences I've had, I can sometimes not be as empathetic as I need to be in certain situations. And I think that's been a weak part for me in life and in business. Seeing lives, people die in these different situations, and being somewhat desensitized to it. I think having little girls, those two little girls, Caroline and Annabelle, have really helped me to have a softer, more sensitive side that I can tell you. Growing up as the older of four boys and having a bit of a military career in Goldman was not always there for me. So I'm learning how to be more sensitive and empathetic, and for my little girls to counter my little dark side, if you will.
So, I want to be very cognizant of your time, and I want to be very respectful of it.
Yeah.
So I do have one more question for you, and then we'll wrap it on up. But what question should I be asking you that I just wouldn't think to ask?
Yeah. I would say, what gets you fired up in a positive and negative way? I think that's always what I wonder about people, right? I would say, in a negative way, I think I've never liked bullies. And so throughout my life, my dark side has probably come out the most when I see somebody taking advantage of someone else who's weaker. And there's a motto the Green Berets have called "De oppresso libre," or to free the oppressed. And whenever I see that, I do become a bit angry, and that's when I put my defender hat on as the oldest of the brothers, and I want to go to battle. And so I would say that gets me riled up in a negative way, but kind of a defend the little brother type of way. So I really don't like bullies, and then I say on the just really positive front, I get very exciting about taking young people that want to make a difference in the world. And young can be young at heart. They can be 75, they can be 65, 80, or 15. And really just giving them the tools to make it to the next level to help others. It's that multiplier effect. And I believe whether it's, Gandhi or Nelson Mandela or Mother Teresa or the business leaders that we see today that are spreading the word in a positive way, like a John Elstrott, it's really having that impact. And I get super excited when I see opportunities to do that.
That's awesome. Well,
and I think I have one right here. So at Coltala.
Well, Edward, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing this time with me. It's been very special. And I just want to say thank you very, very much.
Thank you for all you do. Thank you for the content that you deliver. I think it's very engaging and very helpful. And thank you for your support of Louisiana, and proud to be on your show. And thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I'm humbled to have this opportunity.
Well, thank you again. And to everybody who's watching and listening, thank you all very, very much.
Thanks, guys. God bless.
And I'll see you all on the next episode. Take care now.